meeting is being called to order. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, pursuant to Public Laws 1975, Chapter 231. This agenda is completed to the extent known and was sent to the Trenton Times and the Trentonian newspapers, posted on the first floor bulletin board in the City Hall, and filed in the City Clerk's office. Formal action will be taken. Roll call.
Mr. Blakely.
Present.
Mr. Caldwell-Wilson. Mr. Harrison. Mr. Michelle. Mr. Rodriguez.
Present.
Ms. Vaughn.
Present.
Ms. McBride.
Present.
The governing body, not on your agenda this evening is a presentation that was originally scheduled for Thursday, but due to a communication error, the parties are here this evening to speak to you on the Trenton City update. So I will present to Mr. Delisle, and he will go from there.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Director of Housing and Economic Development. Tonight will be a brief presentation on the land development ordinance. It's being up for a complete update. The last time it was done was introduced or amended an account code in 2010. This is the first major update since that time. It's about a one-year process, and it's a direct and very significant step in implementing the Trenton 50 Master Plan. This is the first major milestone to be completed. Is a technical report, which is analysis of the current land development ordinance, provides recommendations for the updates. So we have Jeff Wilkerson, Director of Planning, who is going to give a brief description of the process. And our consultant from Miros Arista, Strungus, will do a presentation of the findings and of the technical report.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, for allowing us to be here this evening. Like Delisle said, the Director said, Jeff Wilkerson, Supervisor Planner at the City of Trenton. And what I really want to go through primarily is the expectation of this development, this land development ordinance process. Right now, we're going to introduce you a brief review of the technical review report. Also, there was a redevelopment area plan report that was developed as part of the foundation and analysis for this land development ordinance. And then right after that, we'll be drafting a land development ordinance. And at that time, we'll provide right after that time, we'll provide a public engagement, but we'll provide a significant lead time so that everyone's able to read and digest the land development ordinance. So that's the public meetings proposed regulations. And then right after that, we'll do an update to that draft based on public feedback, and then finalize the zoning map. And then that ordinance is reviewed by planning board to make sure it's consistent with the master plan. And then after that, it comes to you guys for an introduction to the ordinance. Any questions? Okay. And so now I'll give it to Mr. Strungus to give you a quick update. I want to give you a quick review of the technical review report.
Again, thank you all for making time for us tonight. And I just wanted to come and present a brief overview of what's in the technical review and the purchase report. This was a series of meetings we did last week when we were here. There was a much longer presentation at those and some very good public engagement that we had, some very positive feedback from the folks that we met with over the course of a couple of days. So this is kind of a pared down version of this. You can see that full presentation on the website as well as the full technical review and purchase report. So the goals within that report that we created were really to look at your development regulations, the LDO, and see how they line up with Trenton 250, understanding that this is a very big master plan that talks about where you want to go in the future. And so what we did was look at that and see how it lines up with the development regulations. In addition to that, what we wanted to do was work through the lens of creating a document that's easy to use and understand. So things like creating a more graphic orientation, making sure everything's written more clearly, that we're enhancing the neighborhood character, that we're lessening the amount of special approval, so that this really does become a much more user-friendly document. A few techniques that we use to accomplish accomplish that kind of basic organization is things like compartmentalization, where we're kind of putting all the life regulations together, whether that be all of the parking found together in one section, all of the uses in one section. Again, as I said, a graphic orientation, a lot of illustrations, a lot of easy way to get into this document, as well as definitions to minimize interpretation. So making sure all the terms that are used within the ordinance are clearly defined within the ordinance so that people can understand what these regulations mean. One of the bigger changes that we proposed is a more modern use of register, and this is the idea of moving away from the way things are now, in which you may say that you have a more generic use definition, but it excludes these uses, or you list a whole series of specific uses, or you say in one district the uses of another district apply plus these. What we want to do is tailor the uses to the district and make sure that we're very clear about what we're allowing and not allowing within each of the districts of the LDO. We understand that some uses have impacts, things like drive-throughs. We want to make sure we build in standards for those so that they're very safely addressed when they're put on the ground. And the way that we do this typically is through use structure. Again, this isn't yours, this is from another community, but we wanted to pull up the table to show you. What you can see is there's kind of two ways into the use matrix. You can either look at your district, and as you go down and look at what's allowed in there, you can figure out what you can do with your piece of property. Or if you wanted to, say, open a business like an art gallery, you can go across and see what districts allow. It makes for a much easier, much more business-friendly, much more predictable ordinance. So neighbors know when we have them next door to their plot of land because they understand the uses that are allowed. We want to address some of the newer uses. Again, many of these things came out of Trenton 250, the idea of a maker community. So looking at things like corner stores and microbreweries, specialty food places such as a coffee roaster, as well as things like community gardens and food trucks. So making sure these new modern uses make their way into the LDO. Like many communities, actually every community across the country that I'm working with, we're all dealing with a number of sensitive uses, things like social service uses, drug treatment facilities, just a reality of today. So we want to make sure that we're proactive in dealing with them and creating standards for their impacts as we move forward and create a structure for the LDO. Finally, addressing things like temporary uses, whether it be a food truck within a parking lot, outdoor entertainment events, things that really are avenues to entrepreneurship, ensuring that those are built in, but that they've got the right standards in place so temporary doesn't become permanent, that they're used for what they're supposed to be. As well as uses to revitalize. We've had a lot of adaptive reuse for the reuse of older buildings here in the city. We want to make sure we build in the right permissions for that so that they're done in the right way and in the right locations, so we can build in permissions into that. So one of the things that we saw when we get here, we did a lot of work across the country. We saw Trenton 250, and we saw that it really laid out the path to the zoning districts, to the way you want to control the regulations, because it speaks to the variety of different development forms that you have here, as well as a lot of guidance, even in terms of things like heights, how many dwelling units you can have, how the building should look, what types you're looking for. So really, this was our guide. And the idea here is really to kind of take the fabric of Trenton and encapsulate it within the zoning district structure so that we've got the right set of housing types in the district so that homeowners are conforming and can make improvements to their home without having to seek a variance of life. Similarly, on the team with us is WRT. They're not here tonight, but they are also working on a redevelopment areas plans report. What they've done is looked at the 40-plus redevelopment area plans and analyzed them to see kind of what their status is. And you can check out that report on the website. The analysis is feeding into the zoning. We're kind of looking at what these redevelopment area plans are saying, and that would help to inform the zoning districts moving forward. So I know this looks like I'm going to be talking for a while, but I'm not. I'm going to go through this very quickly. So what we did was we looked at kind of the on-the-ground conditions and really tried to encapsulate those within the zoning district structure that reflected Trenton 250, and this is kind of where we proposed it. Once we actually start writing, this may change, but really our basis is what's already been adopted in the plan. As you can see, the Trenton 250 talks about 3 densities of residential development, low, medium, and high. Taking a look at that, looking at the current zoning, we've come up with residential districts that reflect that gradation of density types. As you can see, the naming conventions may look very familiar between proposed district and Trenton 250. What we've done is really looked at kind of what the plan talks to and crafted a proposed structure for districts based upon those. The neighborhood commercial, the Main Street, and as well as the corridor mixed use. Again, looking at Trenton 250's mixed use categories, and kind of looking at what's here on the ground, we kind of come up with a district structure that reflects that. As you can see, the mixed use flex, mixed use transition, and downtown, very common. But the other two that are new, not coming from the plan, would be Trenton Arts and Focus, the Creative Arts District, as well as the TOG centered around the transit station. Those may be districts that you would like. Not sure if we'll make it all the way through to the end of the ordinance, but something we wanted to at least show how they can be integrated. And then finally, kind of these are fairly typical, your industrial uses as well as your special purpose uses, again reflective of Trenton 250. The only one that is new is the industrial mixed use. This is a new category we think again could help with adaptive reuse. Those are those areas in transition between commercial and industrial that, you often see them at the dog daycare with the CrossFit, with some industrial uses going on. This is a category that can help to manage those areas. So that's really the heart of the ordinance, but there's still other stuff that's quite important. So we want to look at a number of different things, and site development standards are key. We wanted to look at accessory structures, kind of the full gamut, everything from the standard fence or garage, home occupation, to more sustainable things such as solar and wind, as well as even urban agriculture if that's desired, the keeping of chickens, keeping of bees, and even accessory dwelling units or granite flags, coach houses, as those are called, if those are appropriate in certain areas of the city. Landscaping, we've made some proposals looking at improving landscaping and making it consistent throughout. So that's one of the ideas, creating standards that are consistent for landscaping throughout the city. We're looking at the parking ratios to understand in a built-out city, parking is an issue. So it's looking at a variety of ways, as you see in the report, where we talk about certain flexibilities and exemptions, as well as required bicycle parking, looking at the multimodal complete streets policy, as well as signs. Again, certain rulings have come down, you have to be content neutral. It comes out of a Supreme Court decision in 2015, so we want to make sure that your sign regulations line up with that. You may have other signs too, here being an older city, classic signs that may not fit your new sign regulations, but you want to preserve because they're part of the city's character. We proposed a technique called classic signs that would allow those to stay and not be considered part of a non-conforming sign. Finally, towards the end of it, you get into more of the administrative stuff. We know that here in New Jersey, there is the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law. We want to stay aligned with that. That gives you a lot of the procedures for many of your zoning applications. So basically, making sure that we're keeping up with those, that they're clear and predictable. People know where do I go, what's the process going to be, and who's in charge of this. You can see listed there a number of the different zoning approvals that are in place that we propose to kind of just clean up and keep moving throughout the ordinance. The one new one that we did want to propose, and just want to take a second to kind of explain it, is the idea of the plan development process. And this is something that, we'll need to draft and need to vet with the public, with the planning board and you as well. If this is something you want, it's kind of considered a redevelopment area kind of light, except doesn't involve the taxing structures and the like. Essentially what it says is that if I'm in a commercial district and I have a very innovative design that requires a bit extra height and different uses, maybe some setback adjustments, rather than going for a whole series of variances, I think is the plan development process. The key to the plan development process is that it's a negotiation with the city. A public benefit has to come back to the city as part of that development. You can't just be granting of these various flexibilities. It is the way that it should be structured. It is a multi-step process with options for public, many opportunities for public input, so that you can get the public's take on the proposed development that's coming in. So this is something that we'll continue to kind of discuss with everyone as we move forward to see if it's something that the city would like. And then finally, subdivision approvals. Your current subdivision stuff is all in your current zoning ordinance, so we need to keep it in there. Again, just making sure that it lines up with what's required by New Jersey land use law, making sure that it's clear and easy to understand. and clarifying how off-site improvements apply when are they required, as well as looking at things like the public realm standards as part of that subdivision. When streets are created or when streets are reconstructed, that they work towards achieving the complete streets goal that's been the policy that's been adopted, and really creating standards that help to guide that are flexible enough to deal with the fact that you are a built density with right-of-ways pretty much established, and making sure we can work within those parameters. And then finally, the last section is the nonconformities. Our goal throughout this process would be to reduce the number of nonconformities throughout the city. We want to make sure that somebody who is a homeowner has the ability to improve their house. Their house has been there forever. It's the same size as everybody else on the block, but they want to come in and improve their home. We want to get rid of these nonconformities so they don't have to get a variance, and financing isn't difficult. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, some things remain non-conforming, and while we're not suggesting that any of them go away, that everything would be grandfathered, we wanted to build in the rules for how they can be maintained, what can happen, how they can be improved, if they can be improved, moving forward kind of over time and then eventually for the gradual elimination. And with that, this is the website, TrentonCityCouncil20191001. This has everything on there. It has the longer presentation from the week before. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, go ahead, Councilwoman. I noticed that you mentioned the Trenton Artisan Focus. Is the Creek Canal part of this 250?
Yes, it's the same thing.
It is? Is that attached?
I'm going to let Jeffrey answer that. I just think it's...
Yeah, the arts and focus is the same title for the Creek Canal plan. It's the same document.
But that's Trenton Artisan Focus, that's not Creek Canal.
Yeah, it's the same name. I don't know if it
Why aren't we recognizing Creek Canal? That was a community effort that they worked very hard to bring together.
right, it is the same document. That is the document we're talking about. I'm not sure if arts and focus that's the same. It's the same title. It's arts and focus, Creek Canal.
So,
Yeah.
and so you talked about food truck parks.
Mm-hmm.
You had parks in mind for this?
No, it's really just a use that we've found a lot of communities would like to have. It's something that we can evaluate over time. Essentially, the park would be, if you were to have a big influx, we could set up a kind of permanent food truck park area for it. We don't have to have this use, but this is something we at least wanted to present and show the standards going forward so you can evaluate whether or not it's appropriate for here.
So if we decided that we wanted to create a food park, we would go for the public to be as an
Generally, you would make them a conditional use because we do want them to have public input because there is, there's people, there's noise, there's litter. So usually they are made a conditional use.
And then, in the first part of it, you said prohibited uses. What were the prohibited uses?
What I was referring to in certain sections of the ordinance, it says all these uses are allowed except for these, and list them as prohibited. I don't have an example off the top of my head. We want to move away from doing that. What we want to say in the new LDO would be, this is the district, these are the uses that are allowed. Prohibited uses is really a frowned upon technique in zoning, because if you don't get specific and list it as being prohibited, you can create a loophole. So we just want to move to telling people what they can do, and moving forward in that way rather than the way things are handled now in some cases.
Councilman Santiago?
I remember when they started Trenton to 50 a couple of years ago. What I haven't seen yet is public restrooms. Well, downtown here, State Street, you have a big problem. Come down there, there's no way where you can use the Dunkin' Donuts. If you're not a customer, you cannot use the bathroom. And you have to spend $5 at least. That's the way it is downtown. I would like to see if there's some type of accommodation to be done for that. As in, it's done in Germany, France, or everywhere else.
Right. If we can look at some of that, it would end up having to work more within a bonus structure because zoning doesn't get that specific about requiring a public restroom, but things like the planned development that I talked about, that can be used as leverage as part of one of the public benefits or amenities. So there's ways we can work it and incentivize it. I don't think that we can't, from a zoning perspective, require it, but we can incentivize it. Thank you.
So additionally, members of the with us are State Janet Shawanow, who was requested to come and explain some financial documents to the governing body.
Hello, my name is John Shannon, and I was told that I was to come here and to answer any questions that you had on those issues that you were provided last time, but I have updated it so that now it is from 50 FY15 and 19. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer. You were given last time you were given two financial statements for FY 19 and 18. This one now includes from 19 to 15. So it has 40 years on it. It's all on one sheet for each particular page.
I think the two sheets that you're referring to represent to regarding the water sewer department.
Correct. It's the water, it's actually the water financials. It's the annual financial statements for the water.
I have a question. So these are, this financial statement represents the total operations of Trenton Waterworks, all its operating revenue and expenditures.
As of the year end, yes, as of June 30th of 19 through 15, I guess.
Are these audited out?
They are not. The FY19 is not, but the rest of them, when we produce, there was no changes to the statements from 18 to 15.
So this is the audited review numbers that
Except for 19, they haven't covered that.
understood. And can we just choose 1 year? Let's do 2018. And I choose that year because that's the only year that I've been really familiar with. Because of financials, I just want to try to reconcile that this document with what was reported to our external regulator, EPU.
Okay.
At year end 2018, we reported from the city that we had I think it's 44 million total in operating revenue.
For the BPP report, that is a for-profit report versus the municipal audit statement is not-for-profit. So that the main difference is what you bill is what you collect as revenue and profit. Okay, in municipal, what you bill isn't it's what you collect. It's actually on the cash basis. So it's a lot different. So to get the feeling of what you said, that doesn't have any real bearing on what our municipal financial statement is.
So on the summary line, you have a total for 2018, you're reporting a total revenue number of minus
On page, Revenue numbers are on page 44. Letter. Okay, and I circled the top numbers. Okay. The top numbers look,
So I see 66 for fiscal year 2018. I see a total revenue realized number of 66.9 million.
no, page 44 is for 18, it's 55, 5,
Okay, I'm looking on page sheet 45. No, sheet 45.
What are the expenses?
Your total revenue realized on page 45. And then you subtracted the total adjusted expenditure on page 45 of 51.7 million. And you got an access number of 15 million. Is that access
Surplus? That is access before they take out the 3,150,000.
And then where's that 3 million?
That goes over to the current fund.
Okay. On what page is that?
You don't see current fund on this. It just shows that that money has been budgeted for years, that the townships have allowed us to take from the water utility and put into the current fund.
Oh, is that, I think it's there, I think I see it's called budget appropriation surplus, general budget, is that line? The 3.1 million?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's also on page 45, so it does summarize it nicely. So you have the total realized fiscal 2018 at 66.9 million, minus the total expenditures of 51.7 million, and then we have the access surplus of 15.1 minus the 3.15. Right. And that logic follows through
All the other years. Yes. And I just want to bring to your attention that on that same page, on page 45, we can see the arrows coming down. On page 44, where you have the circle at the top. This is the number that's being used from the surplus to balance the budget for that year. And if you look at FY15, it's 3.6 million. That money came out of surplus to balance the budget in FY15. If you look at FY16, it's 6.2 million. And if you go over to FY17, it's 12.6 million. When you go over to 18, it's 14.2. And you go over to 19, it's 14.1. Now that is all coming out of surplus, so the previous year's surplus, whatever that was, that money comes out of that number, it goes into balancing the budget. So that's one of the ways that the surplus gets reduced, is by using our surplus to balance the budget, which means that the rates, the amount we're collecting for the customers isn't enough to substantiate the utility.
So having said that, there has been questions as to the amount of surplus that can be allocated to cover the budget or utilized to support the city budget across all the other departments, right? Other public utilities have reported that they don't have a percentage, or that was given to them. Where is that percentage derived?
Percentage of what?
Of the surplus that's utilized for,
It's just the amount that's needed to balance the budget. you have all your expenses, you come up with all your expenses that you have, and you have a number. And then you have your safety, your revenues from your rents. And then anything else that is the difference is what you have to come up with from
Well,
your
you're talking about
surplus.
just for the water, just for the water budget, not for the revenues that we can use from our surplus to help assist.
I'm talking strictly water, strictly water.
So how about that, since we're on that topic? So how much over the years have we used to balance the budget
As I said,
across other departments?
really want to cost other departments.
This other city departments like Public Works.
I don't know. That I don't know. It's not here in this.
Right.
It's in there and it's mixed up into the expenses and I can't.
But we want, if you can take that away, that's something that this council, we need to know that because we want to be able to use whatever assets in our city that produce revenue that can assist the balance of our overall city budget. Because Trenton Water Works is a department, right? It's a department of water and sewer, it's part of the city budget as well. So if we could capitalize on one of our departments that is a big generator, all of our departments generate some level of revenue. Trenton Water Works just is a behemoth. We just want to use that surplus to help out other departments. And that's not uncommon across the other public water utilities.
But you first have to think of the water utility being balanced in their budget. And if you looked at this year, that there's only $9 million left in surplus.
So, all right, so now I'm going to ask.
So, and to balance the budget last year and previous years, it took over $14 million from surplus. So I don't see how right now that the water utility can do any more for the city because it needs to balance its budget.
Correct. Understood 100%. And be able to support over long term as well to the revenue needed to do the capital improvements. So, so where, I guess, the detail as to where the appropriations are going, where the revenues being where it's being depleted.
Revenue or expenses?
No, the revenue. So you have your operating revenue that is generated from the revenue that's coming from our ratepayers, right? The ratepayers, right?
It's called water rents. And then we have fire hydrant service, and then we have miscellaneous. That's about it, besides then the surplus.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just saying, where on the expense line item, liability, where are our largest expenditures that's sort of depleting the revenues? That's only $9 million because we're generating, almost $50 million in revenue. I just don't see clearly, at least not in these schedules, as to where we could more efficiently utilize the funds. Like where do we see the concentration of the expenses?
That would be a detailed analysis of the expenses, if that's what you need.
And the other thing that you referred to, when was the last time we had an increase in our rates?
I believe it was about 10 years ago. I'm not positive of that.
Is there someone from the water utility that can tell us what the best practices in industry around rate increases and analysis to make certain that we are keeping the market and that we are generating the amount of revenue that we need to keep our water utility in the black and clearly after 10 years of not increasing the rates, we're not really keeping up, we're not generating the amount of revenue that we're going to need to sustain the utility or maintain it.
I believe Mr. Vico.
Let it come to the microphone.
So I guess my questions are.
I'm Steve Pico, interim director. I think I'm up a little bit later in the agenda. Normally, the utility, it's a constant. You're doing this in every budget year. And normally, a utility will look at rate increase options every 2 years. The fact that it hasn't been done for 10 years is a glaring red flag that you may know, or I think we announced when we came in, I've asked for an internal operations audit for those kinds of questions to be used.
I appreciate these. It's good to know that you guys are looking at that now, and because revenue generation in the city has been a challenge across the board in all our departments.
Well, exactly. Our 2 biggest problems, just so you have a clear idea of the picture, we lose 30% of it every day. We don't know where it goes. We have a suspicion of where it goes. We think a lot of it is in abandoned housing, the pipes have been ripped out, and because we're an integrated system, it goes into the sewer, we don't really pick it up. We see it go out. We have crews now, whenever we see a significant jump in monthly bill, we're trying to get out there and physically inspect, turn off the water. We established a delinquent account thing in our buildings because we have a very high delinquent account ratio as well. So we're looking at a couple of ways to increase revenue. Make your building more efficient. Get a hold of your water losses and make sure that your building equipment, the gauges and everything else are accurate and in line. And we have things going on all of those. There'll be I would anticipate before the end of the year, you'll see something on a resolution to upgrade our gauges so that we can get accurate, real-time results. And we're going to be required to do something like the Board of Public Utilities. Anyway, we want to get at it.
And I just want to say that I've been an advocate of, not irresponsibly. A lot of folks, even in our customer base, get really frightened or kind of, on the defensive when we say rate increases. But rate increases, like any other business, it's like your bank account, right? When you go to the ATM machine, this is just fee revenue. Fee revenue is the easiest way how all businesses generate cash flow. So we need to be prudent about that. We should talk about it more. It is not something that we're going after people and our customers to say we're just trying to gouge you and nickel and dime you. It's prudent because otherwise we're never going to be able to afford to maintain our infrastructure and generate the level of capital that's going to be needed over the long term.
Couldn't agree with you. Go ahead. There's a very set, because the board looks over our shoulder on rates, a very set procedure for doing that. It involves doing a rate study. The rate study gives you numbers, and as long as you stay within the numbers that that rate study gives you, the board is going to, 9 times out of 10, it's going to give you that rate increase. The board looks, we're not directly on the board.
Oversight, absolutely.
But we're going to employ that because it gives everybody a defensible base for whatever number we come up with. And we use that methodology, accept it all over the state. It's hard to argue against it.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I'm a champion for our water department and keeping it a public utility. And in order to do that, we've got to remain compliant with our regulators, EPA, DEP, and of course, we all talk about water quality and making sure we keep it, that we sustain water quality and we're providing clean water, etc. But we can't provide clean water and high quality if we don't have the money or the cash to maintain the infrastructure that produces that high quality clean water.
The best example was what I wanted to do in my presentation. thing that failed in our system. It was a injector. The injector was only a year and a half old, but it was grafted onto a 30-year-old piece of equipment, so with semi-predictable results. So I'll cover all that when I'm up in front of you again, if you want to get on with it.
No, I appreciate it. No, thank you so much.
So, I have a question. I would like to ask about bonds. So, we were asked to okay the drawing down of $22 million of bonds from the board, right? So, if we only have $9 million, I just need to understand how that works. If we only have $9 million in surplus and we're drawing down 20, what are you drawing the bonds down against? Because the last time the young lady spoke, she said all of the current revenue that is coming in is being spent out as far as the day-to-day services. So if the money that is our revenue, the 44 million, the 27 that's generated from our outside customers, and the 17 that's generated from the residents here in the city, if that's being spent out as we get it, and we have $9 million in surplus, how does that work?
Okay, when you approve a bond ordinance, okay, to spend 22 million, that doesn't mean that you go out and you get money for 22 million. That's no. What it means is that you have projects that add up to 22 million, and during the year you spend maybe 2 or 3 million or whatever, 5 million. Then during that year, then you borrow for that 5 million. You're not borrowing for the 22 because you didn't spend it. You only borrowing for 5, whatever, the 5 million. So if you look on the second page, it says there's bonds and authorized but not issued. There's $93 million that you approve bonds, but you have not spent it yet, and you have not borrowed for it yet. So, just to give you a group that we don't hold, we have these ordinances, and the projects sometimes get stopped, and this is, so the 22 million that we approved, it's in this number, okay? Well, I don't know if it was approved FY19 or FY20, 19. It's in that number because we didn't spend any of it yet until we actually go and do some of the projects, and then we can borrow, and we usually don't borrow until the end of, like, the middle of June, so that we make the utility whole, so going into the end of the year.
So you're saying that the 93 million bonds that have not been issued as yet, that's
There are more bond ordinances
but that's for specific projects. That's for specific jobs.
each year.
So the bond request recently was for something totally different.
What was 22 million, something else was 18 the other year, and then other years that there's remaining money left. So we haven't borrowed this yet,
Okay, so
and they're all for specific projects.
I understand because they're authorizing not issued, which means we're not going down on it right now.
Correct, we haven't borrowed, we haven't gone to get notes for the amount that, for the, so we didn't spend it.
Why are we increasing that, or is that 20 million included in that?
It's probably included, depending on when did that happen, it can't be that
Because it
one.
hasn't been voted on.
So that's not in there, it's not in there.
So why would we, so that would bring it up?
There are specific projects in there that need to be done, and you can't change it like when you're doing a bond orders, it's specific.
So I'm thinking it would be very helpful to this body, I know it would be to me, if we had specifics on that 93 million that are just sitting there waiting for us to borrow, and what it's for, and what the one that they're trying to bring up to us to float more bonds for. so we can get a better picture of the spending, because if you're not, and I don't know how old these bonds are, and I have a lot of ordinances at home with bonds, and I don't know if they were used or they're just sitting there, so it would be helpful us to have some sort of inventory as to what this is all about.
I can give you that.
President Ryan.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So can I actually get a list of all of the unborrowed bonds that we have out and the projects that they're aligned with? Or,
That's exactly what Margie asked for.
well, not just the waterworks, but for the entire city. So, I'm asking for that. I don't know what she's asking for.
You can get anything you want.
Yeah, so, thank you. So I'd like to see that just for my own interest and just see where we are in the process for these projects that we fund. And so I'd like to see that.
I can give you an appendix report of all the bonds and the amounts that are there, and the descriptions there, for water utilities and the general capital fund. I mean, it's all there. It's nothing that I have to come up with, things in evidence.
Well, yeah, I would. So if you can send it to me, I really appreciate it.
Just hold on a second. What I asked you for, can you match it up with the ordinance numbers?
The account number has the ordinance number in it.
Okay, so I can check.
Yes, you can.
Councilman, Councilman.
Well, I would like to have the whole city is, you say you have.
I'll provide it to everyone.
Okay.
Order and the general capital.
Now, I have a question. What will be included in that? What will be included in what I'm looking for is the projects that were outlined in the ordinance and the progress that we have in terms of the money that we borrowed and the money we haven't borrowed and what's going on, just so that I can have a general idea.
You'll see at the beginning, you'll see the amount that was appropriated to that, and then what's the remaining balance, and then what project it was for, and the agreements it came from.
And as well as the status of the project.
I can't give you that. That can be provided from Warner, that I can provide. I don't know what's viable, what's not viable, what's going on, I don't.
You're looking for
For the
the
general.
actual amount that was actually drawn down for that particular.
Yeah, and what is that,
particular project.
and what part of the project has actually been completed? Like, where are we at in terms of, so say if it was for a building, has the building been built? And just general status of that the money we're spending.
If it's general capital, you would have to go to each department and provide, and they would have to provide the status of each project. Because I can't, I'm only finance, I'm only taking down the numbers and collecting and gathering, I don't know the status.
The ocean.
So hypothetically, for the water department, there was I think it was in 2010, there was a $13 million bond that was taken, it was $13 million that issued for the water, for the reservoir cover.
That's the NJEIT
Right. So,
loan, it's a loan, okay?
okay, so what's that? And they,
It's as you go, you spend,
right.
so.
Oh, so that wasn't a bond. I thought it was a bond.
It's a loan, it's considered, when you do the bond ordinance, it's still considered a bond, okay, but it's
It's one of those loans, it's a debt instrument, right?
So, but it's, we got the debt through NJ, and they gave us a certain amount of money, and we booked that certain amount of money, but we have not spent.
Well, we did.
Well, we spent some
Some
of it.
of it. So in that regard, how would that be reflected on here? I guess that's, because right now, like, okay, so it was a bond or a loan issue, a debt instrument.
Still outstanding.
Still has, so,
Issue that.
right, so, but a portion of it wasn't spent. They said it's spent.
Some of it goes out of that, into.
Okay, right. So, but we got a key to take down that, so where's the line item for the debt servicing of but continue to pay because, like you said, the projects come in, not all at once, but incrementally.
That service
In that reporting line,
is,
yeah, on page.
it's on page 41A. Okay, it has, what's the receivable?
I didn't see it.
Receivables are there for what's outstanding in the bonds.
And that's fine. I just want to make sure that when you do that report that Mark Caldwell suggested, that I guess that would show in granular detail as to which bonds have been drawn down, what proportion, and which ones are in the process of we're paying back, we're servicing. That would be in there.
So, I wanted to ask about the reserve principal forgiveness NJIT loan. What is that about? The reserve principal, that's on page 41A. Yeah. The third one about reserve principal forgiveness, New Jersey IT loan.
There's, I don't know exactly how the JEIT works, but there's, they come up with this principal forgiveness that every year you don't have to pay a certain amount of money. And I don't know really how it works, but it's part of the whole NJEIT where part is a loan and part is a grant. The grant part is that you don't have to pay it back. Okay, so the loan part you have to pay back with some interest, the grant part is that you just, I'm not sure, it's a loan and grant, and principal forgiveness is a benefit for the city that we don't have to pay back. Is there any other questions?
Yes, I do have one more. Deferred reserve for a amortization. What is that? Is deferred reserve, so that amount of money has been deferred to what?
It's an accounting term. And it goes along with reserve for amortization. Okay, now this is deferred reserve for amortization. So how accounting goes for utility, I'm not, because I don't do with accounting, but this is the number where it gives us when a project's done, it goes into this, and it just accumulates.
So when a project is done, the money goes into this deferred account?
Once you bond it, and then it goes into this account. And it just accumulates, it just gets larger and larger. I can get it.
Yeah, I don't understand the answer that you're giving me.
It's complicated and it's complicated. And I have to say, doing reserve amortization, because we don't have it in the general fund, just have it in the water, that's how the water utility works. I can ask somebody and get explanation of what the reserve for amortization and the deferred reserve for amortization.
Yes, I was just trying to see how much money was
I just have
deferred.
one question. Is there any concern, considering the level of debt that we're taking on? Not that's negative because it depends on the size of our asset, right? 93 million looks like a big number, but if our water utility is a $300 million revenue generation asset, then 93 is not so bad. So I just wanted to know, is there any concern, Michelle Hart, as to our debt to equity ratios?
The only thing I can say about that question is that when we filed the the supplemental debt statement for the $22 million for the water utility, we were still, the water utility was self-sufficient. And it didn't need any funds from the current fund. Okay, so that's all I can really say, that right now the water utility is on its own, yes, self-liquidating.
Because it's always that is a measure that as a financial officer, you sort of monitor the debt.
The water utility really needs to be self-liquidating. If it isn't, then we're in trouble.
Our debt starts to increase to the point where our equity levels are being depleted, and then our water rates aren't being generated, are not increasing to generate that revenue. To offset that debt, then we're starting to go underwater real quick. We want to avoid that, but I assume you're professional and you're monitoring that and make sure that that doesn't happen.
It's not now.
Okay, very good.
I'm just a little confused, because I'm trying to figure out what the reserve for amortization and $192 million and the deferred reserve. I just need some clarity on those two things.
I will get that.
I'm just not understanding.
I will get that to you. I'll have a better definition of what that is.
Okay.
Okay?
And one more question. You mentioned, I'm very happy to hear it, because I haven't heard it since I've come on council, but you said water utility accounting.
It's a different municipal county for water utility. They use the word deferred amortization and reserve amortization, and is a little bit different than what the general capital fund uses.
We got, as a council, we kind of recommended or championed that the water utility get that sort of level of expertise, not necessarily paid for that line item, but someone who understands water utility accounting, financials.
It should be a municipal, and it should be somebody that's a registered municipal accountant versus a person that's certified public accountant. Just my opinion.
Well, I'm hoping that you will be in that process when those candidates come through the door to help Mr. Pico determine who that financial professional will be to work as our water utility and help with our financial statements. Thank you.
Okay, I have another question. So the $9 million that we have in surplus and the actual hiring that we're doing and the projects that we're doing, how far is $9 million going to take us based on the fact that we still had used $14 million of our surplus to balance the budget? Now, if there's only $9 million in the surplus, we're still going to be short of $5 million if we need to use that to balance the budget, right? Plus, we have hiring and we have upgrades. So
That's why Mr. Fico is looking into a rate increase and going to pursuing the rate increase and going forward with that.
okay, but
He said it was in this year.
I'm a little at a disadvantage because I'm, a heavy 2 weeks into the job here, so please excuse me when
So the question is, we only have $9 million in surplus, $9 million for 198,000. So we're the shortfall as far as the budget is concerned.
the budget planning, I think we're in a shortfall.
So
part of it's got to be a rate increase at some time.
Right, so
And
we haven't received our budget yet, and we're in the budget shortfall. Plus, we have the upgrades still going on.
a lot of the upgrades are on the bonding side. Most of the upgrades we're doing were either anticipated in the previous budget and are already, that money's already there. I mean, we're looking forward a year to 18 months. this situation that you're describing is a forward-looking. Everything you're seeing now is based on the budget that's in place now for which funds are appropriated and available. When I sign a resolution that comes to you, there's a box that tells me that A, it's going to that account, and B, there's enough money in the account to cover that call. So it comes from me to you as a resolution with a number on it. There's money in the budget for that number. You're not increasing a deficit or anything else. You're just spending money according to a previously approved budget process. And that's where we are right now. Next year, we have work to do. And I'll be working closely with everybody to make sure we do it right. But you put your finger right on the issue, and there's a couple of things we need to do. One of them is probably consider a rate increase. Other is to get a good handle on how our bonding, where we are in our bonding projects, what we can use that bonded money for in terms of things that might otherwise go to that deficit. Look at all of that. But again, I'm 2 weeks into it. I can't really give you a definitive answer.
Right, because my next question would have been, if we had $93 million in bonds that we hadn't drawn down on, and I know you just got me here, why would we be spending the available cash that we had rather than to pull down and draw on those bonds?
And an excellent question. Two different pots of money.
Right.
We can only spend bond money on specific items directly related to whatever the bond language was, but whatever it is. So we did let's say we put a $10 million bond out to replace aging water lines along Route 29. That may be a $10 million bond. We may have only spent $7 million of that bond. Is the project over? Is there more that needs to be done? Is there something we can do along that offsets something that might be in the shortfall? Those are all questions that you ask when you're going forward. But we're not spending any money now that changes our bond position. What we're trying to do is look at exactly what our bond position is in terms of what we spent, we haven't spent, where we are in the projects, to see how much flexibility we have going forward. And it's just too early in the process for me to tell you the answer to that. I'm as nervous as you. I know exactly where you're coming from, and go ahead. President Brown.
Yes. Councilman Blakely wants to ask.
So, Ms. Schroeder, you made a point about the necessity, as well as you answered this as well, Mr. Pino. This council passed a few weeks ago I believe it was a resolution or ordinance for a certified public accountant for the waterworks.
I'm not sure we need a CPA. I think, we need a specific kind of expertise that knows his or her way through the municipal budgeting process, and we're looking at that.
So can you explain the difference between why we don't need a CPA and why we need a registered municipal accountant? I guess it's
Different accounting, different tools, different. Well, you heard a couple of different language almost. They handle things slightly. The CPAs are usually used in product leasing. A lot of bonds require CPAs for audit purposes. The firm that's going to do, I hope, what we call a process audit in the utilities, a CPA firm. But they have municipal people. They work with utilities before they know what they're looking at. But to have someone there on a day-to-day basis, you want somebody who knows the pots, knows how they interact, knows how to talk to other people in that world, and get things done. And that's
so what would be the civil service title for someone who has a registered municipal accounting designation? Is there a particular position, or do we say we want to hire a registered municipal accountant? Where's their position?
I think it's like an accountant or
having a registered, or having a chief accountant, is specifying that we want someone with a registered municipal accounting designation. And I hope that we rescind the resolution that we supported asking for a certified public accountant, and that we look for a chief accountant, which is, as you mentioned, a civil service designation, outline that we want someone with a municipal accounting designation so that we can, have the personnel. Why do you think would you recommend having somebody, well, let me ask it this way. Does someone in the water utility have this designation?
No. If someone who's familiar with with the operation, knows the city budget process and that sort of thing, and she's just come over. And we are looking for someone, we're actively looking for support in that function.
So would you recommend, is it best practice to have a registered municipal accountant on staff in the water utility? Is that something that happens in a lot of water utilities?
It's a good question, and I don't know the exact answer. It really depends. You need someone who understands the municipal accounting process. And probably if you're going to have a chief accountant or something like that, it's not a bad designation to have. Whether we have to spend money to get that level of expertise, I don't know. It's too soon. I can't. I'm still assessing everybody who's there. And I've frankly been pretty impressed with everybody who's there in these various functions I've learned so far. We need a little time to figure out.
Is it possible for you to send the council a memo with your opinion about the importance of this,
Sure.
as well as recommendations about the type of person that we need? I mean, we don't have to do a resolution, we can just wait for the budget process, but we have a resolution out that's been passed by this council asking for a designation that we may not need.
But I think that resolution came from a pretty legitimate concern. I'm not going to get lost in the details of the specifics. I mean, I'm here to tell you, you've got your finger on the problem. We're looking at it. We know we need some additional help. We're looking for that help. When we get that help, we'll come to you that here's the person we found. Here's why we think they're the right person.
Yeah.
I mean, I think rescinding and passing just create a lot of.
That's your opinion. And all I'm saying is details matter.
Right.
And and I agree with the spirit of the request for an accountant in the water utility. I just think it's important that we are very precise, and if you're going to do something, it's prudent to do it right, rather than.
No disagreement there.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Council President Burke? I just want to be clear, okay, about a CPA and the reason why this council recommended a CPA for the water utility. We were told by, you may, Mr. Pico, because I read your resume, very impressive. You've been around the water industry. So there are 9 other public water utilities like Trenton in the state, and I met with some of them. One of them, a couple of them had educated us to say, we have an accountant that's dedicated to our water utility, some routine, some combination, some higher, depending on how large, how small, but they are by profession an accountant. That means they have a designation of CPA. Now, wait, let me finish. I'm just telling you what, I'll just use two Bordentown and Wildwood, right? So, okay, there's Michael Cameron over at BPA. So the logic is that, yes, a CPA practices what we call in this country, general accounting acceptable principles. Okay, it's like you get a law degree, it's journal, right? So, but at the end of the day, we want the standard financial statements coming out of our water utility that's compliant with GAAP, right? So, oh wait, let me just finish, right? So, all I'm saying, you know, look, we haven't been getting that. So, the other water utilities were very adamant that they engaged in hiring and retained CPA firms as well as a water law attorney. And that CPA also, as Janet Schoenhardt stated, not only are they CPA, but they have other designations as well. And that's fine. If it's one that's for municipal water utilities, which the designation that most of the other water utilities have, they have CPAs who also have the designation of municipal water utility, designation to prepare financials specifically for water utilities. And that's the spirit of our resolution.
You know, look, I totally get it, but I'm still struggling myself on the status of everything, because we're not technically a water utility. So that, you know, things get a little murky when you start backing away from those definitions. I mean, we agree that function needs to be addressed. We're addressing it, and as soon as I have a recommendation, I'll give it to you, and we can decide whether it's the right one.
BPU, the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, have Trenton Water Utility, water as a department. Actually, it's the only utility, water service, water utility, or filtration plant that is designated as a department. It's called the Department of Water and Sewer, Trenton, New Jersey. That's the way we have it. I understand.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Howard. So continue with the agenda, we will go through the docket for the meeting on Thursday, October 3rd, 2019. At that time, we present to you the minutes from June 18, 2019 executive session, the minutes from the August 1st, 2019 combined meeting, the September 3rd, 2019 conference session, and the September 5th, 2019 regular session. The 27th item of communication, consider petitions from zero reports being presented to you for your approval. Ordinances being presented for second reading and public hearing is ordinance 19-60, which is an ordinance amending Article 1 of the Trenton City Code, titled licensing. Yes.
From ordinance 1960, I will propose that it be tabled for the next meeting because he's still working on the language and some, there might be some. Still, we cannot make a decision Thursday.
Who is working on the language?
There is the administration, so this is how the administration you want to further on the amendments.
Okay, so this ordinance was prepared by us, so I'm unaware of anybody working on any additional language. So who would be that person? Ms. Harris prepared this ordinance.
But the language itself, there's a couple of things here that could be amended.
Well, wouldn't Mr. Harris know about it if he's the one that produced the ordinance?
Well, that was the last minute statement. That's why I suggest I be tabled for the next meeting so that we have time
Talk to Mr. Harris and whoever else.
to whoever is in the police. It's not an ABC change, so.
But I just want to make it clear that I believe Mr. Harris, because he worked on the ordinance, and I think they have to come to him and get the license and everything, so he has to be included.
Definitely.
Okay, Mr. Harris, we can move forward. He will move the table out on Thursday.
So just to be clear, this was scheduled for a public hearing, and we're moving that be tabled as well?
Yes, President. So we have a public hearing on the amended version.
We can't do that.
No, once you table it and you make the changes, then the process starts all over again, doesn't it, Mr. Harris?
That's correct. If you're going to substantially change the ordinance, then it will need to be re-advertised and a second public hearing will need to be had. So if you, I would recommend that you had the public hearing, have the discussion, and then whatever amendments be made, move forward from there, than just tabling the whole thing, because which way, we're still going to go to a public hearing.
So, Mr. Harris, let me ask you this. Mr. Harris, let me ask you this. So, if the language is changed drastically, because you don't know what the changes are going to be, would it be the best thing to speak to the actual change rather than to speak to this particular?
So what I would recommend would be to go to the public hearing. Whatever discussion is determined at the public hearing, if the body decides at that time that they want to amend the ordinance, that they put a motion to amend the ordinance to the proper language. That ordinance will be recrafted and presented back to you. It will be republished, having a subsequent public hearing, and then you could proceed with the adoption. To just table the whole thing really doesn't accomplish anything.
Okay, Mr. Harris, when do you would? We have a public hearing?
All right. So we'll move forward with the public hearing on Thursday.
With 1960 and 1961, clarity.
Yes.
I have a question.
It was just for 1960. Is this? It was just for 1960. It's a different ordinance.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm looking at the docket, 19-43. The ordinance transferring recreation, natural resources, and culture into a separate department and transferring inspections to the Department of Housing and Economic Development. Has it been pulled? It's on my copy. But we didn't.
That's further along in the.
Oh, it's still. Oh, I have it on mine as the first one online. That's why I asked. I didn't see it. It's like it's the first ordinance.
Yeah, that is page number 5, I believe, we're still on page number 3.
Okay, well, the order was different on the online update. Sorry about that. Thank you.
So the second ordinance being presented for second reading in the public hearing is ordinance 19-61, which is ordinance to ensure the city of Trenton is compliant with Public Law 2017, Chapter 183, an act requiring local government units to certify compliance with certain federal hiring requirements when filing annual budgets and amending NJSA 48:4-5 and Public Law 2014, Chapter 32, which is an act concerning certain employment rights of persons with criminal records and supplementing Title 34 of the revised statutes.
I have a question. I noticed that the city attorney has not signed this. Can the law department elaborate on the fact that this is not approved as a form of legality by the law department?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's made its way to Mr. Brown yet. I know the ordinance 1960 was not signed either yet by him. It's still work in progress.
Okay, thank you. Could I have an opinion about the legality? I'm not sure if this is oversight or it's intentional. So if I can get an email about the law department, 1961 and 61.
No problem.
No, first 60 is signed. 60 is signed. 61 is not signed. Thank you.
I don't have much outside of the meetings.
To continue, resolutions being presented, resolutions from the city clerk's office, resolution 19-532 is a resolution of the city of Trenton City Council designating the third Saturday of July as Trenton Goes Skating Day in the city of Trenton. Resolution 19-533 is a resolution reappointing Justin Tibbetts to the Trenton Ethics Board.
Roll call, please.
Roll call on 19-533. And 19-534 is the resolution authorizing the public sale of vehicles at the Trenton Pump Rock Flea Market at the Wireworks Building on October 19, 2019 and October 20, 2019.
Councilwoman Long.
I just want to make sure that I have a resolution here that I need to walk on. And that's the resolution to repeal Resolution 19452, consenting to the appointment of Christina and Brian as chief municipal prosecutors for the city of Trenton.
Can we have that roll call?
So, Mrs. Vaughn is making a motion to include this resolution on the docket for your consideration on Thursday. And is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Michelle. Mr. Boyd, please.
Put that
So-
number right again, put that number right again.
Sorry,
Number, what was that resolution number?
it does not have a number, but it will be numbered.
So, according to the, let me ask a question first. Can the law department clarify their opinion? We all receive an opinion from the law department attesting to the nature of this resolution. Can you please clarify the law department's opinion on the addition of this resolution to the document?
Okay, as of right now, there's no formal resolution presented with regard to this project, right? No number, it's not on the agenda. So
That is correct. It's being presented by Councilwoman Vaughn for consideration by the body on Thursday.
so it's sort of a sua sponte discussion tonight.
What's that?
This is on your own motion, not as part of the.
No. Can you speak into the mic, please?
So there's a resolution being brought up now that is not included on the agenda packet, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. There had been a electronic discussion between Mr. Borelli, the director of the law department, and counsel, Mr. Harris, over the last few days, including the DCA. And the primary position paper, if you will, Mr. Borelli, the law director, is that his legal opinion, after such a resolution, is contrary to law and would expose the city of Trenton to damages for wrongful discharge. Ms. Bryant went through the appropriate path and was nominated and confirmed to be the municipal prosecutor. And that Mr. Morelli's perspective, and that of the law department, is that the only way to remove her would be to prove misconduct of some sort and have a hearing to register and prove that. I don't hear any indication that that's on the agenda tonight. So that's our perspective, is that the horse is out of the barn. And unless some sort of misconduct can be proven, she belongs where she is and has been there for a week or so. Mr. Morelli also mentioned in yesterday's missive to the council and Mr. Harris that such a move would need to be approved by the DCA or cannot be voted upon or presented to the council. Situation similar to that proposed police director Carol Russell. DCA signed off on this crime, and a resolution as proposed by Councilwoman Vaughn, with all due respect, to repeal that appointment that had been made just a couple of weeks ago, may well subject the city to a loss of state aid or a penalty as to its transitional aid. So it's important, I think, to keep that in mind when discussing the situation here. There was a follow-up email from Mr. Morelli to the council. This is just a couple hours ago, actually, where he said that he would not be sending some resumes. There's no resume still up, but essentially what Mr. Morelli is talking about is she's in, we can't let her go because she met the criteria and it's inappropriate as a misconduct to discharge.
Let me ask two follow-up questions.
Sure.
Does the residency requirement apply to this position? And could you clarify, maybe Yoshi may want to,
If I may interrupt the body for a moment, you're going to discuss,
yeah, we have to be right, yes, to be right, correct?
if you're going to discuss the resolution without discussing the content of the individual, you can do that. But if you're going to talk about the specifics of this instance in this.
Oh, no.
Then yeah, I would suggest you go into an executive session, under the employee privilege, rights to the individual, and then proceed. I would not discuss the details of this resolution.
No. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing that. That was actually my second question.
Well, it really has already occurred from the elaboration of the law director, because he put names, positions, and things out into the public, where you had just presented a resolution as to whether or not you were going to present, you had made a motion as to whether or not Mrs. Vaughn's resolution would be included on the docket on Tuesday. It was taken to another level, not by anything the body did, something that happened in Mr.
So I guess my follow-up question is, what are does someone have to be right? So for example, if we were to add this to the document, would we have to write the individual who would add
At this point, I would recommend that you delay this discussion, that you write still this individual, you convene an executive session to further discuss this matter. That would be my recommendation, but I am not the law department, so I would defer to the law department to give you legal counsel.
Yeah, you're not a lawyer, you're right. We need to be right.
Okay, so let me just be clear on something. First, there has been, in my opinion, there has been an act here, because the resolution stated that there should have been advice and consent. There was no advice and no consent. Now you have the attorney that is representing us on the dais putting out this young lady's name, her title, and the whole nine. So first, the error was to bring this resolution into a consent agenda when it should have been an advice and consent, and the mayor should have brought her forward. Then you have the law department giving out names and titles of individuals. And so, Mr. Harris, your recommendation, because right now I don't want to dig this hole any deeper than it is at this point. So your recommendation is to stop now. Enough damage has been done, and move to rights.
That would be my recommendation, but again, you're the body, you decide to do what it is that you decide to do. The legal department gives you advice and counsel. I don't want to be falsely accused of practicing law.
No, I'm not. I just asked you your opinion, not ask.
That would be my recommendation.
But we actually already do a motion, so after I'm done my statement, we'll vote. But quite frankly, you made a reference to putting the person's name out in public. Well, quite frankly, looking at the resolution right here that has been introduced, the title of the resolution is Resolution to Repeal Resolution 19-452, considering to the appointment of Christina M. Bryant as Chief Municipal Prosecutor for the City of Trenton. So it's not the law department, in my estimation, that is sharing her name. The resolution that Councilwoman Vaughn has introduced clearly shows who we're referring to. So it's not some big secret of the law department, made some big error. Quite frankly, even us considering this, quite frankly, we should have rights. Or had it been walked into the document in an abundance of caution, we should have rights to Christina Bryant. I mean, is that something that we should have done? I mean, law department, does that make sense? Is that something that is logical and reasonable?
As a general proposition, regardless of the individual you're talking about, that person should be right to their job position being discussed.
According to the very title of this resolution, it states that her job is in jeopardy based on whatever action will take place. So, quite frankly, I don't think we should even consider this resolution until we do the appropriate thing. And us adding it to the docket is in fact an employment matter. That's an action. And to walk it on this docket, I think, without rising in and going into executive session, is a little irresponsible. So, I'm going to do the responsible thing and say, no, I don't think that we should consider this resolution based on the law department's opinion of its dubious legal status and the fact that it hasn't been in price. Thank you.
Ms. Caldwell.
Council, oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Councilwoman Paul.
Firstly, I have a question for Attorney DeWitt. Does, considering advice and consent is a process, the constitutional power that's given to legislative bodies at all levels of government. Our Congress, our Senate is given to executives like the directors that are sitting here of government and the judiciary of government, meaning officers of the court and prosecutors. So we're talking about a constitutional process that's given to government officials who are part of the cabinet, the executive, and the judiciary branches of our government. Now, Mr. DeWitt, I want to ask you, is Christine Bryant an employee or is she an appointed government official based on the Constitution? Advice and consent. Is she an executive, or she's part of the judiciary that gets advice and consent? Are there separate processes that apply?
She's an employee of the city of Trenton.
Who receives advice and consent. So this council, the reason why I asked that question, I'm not getting an answer. The reason why this resolution was brought forward, because Mr. DeWitt mentioned at the top that Mr. Morelli, in his opinion, said that this individual received employment by the process, that she went through the proper process and procedure. I believe that that is not accurate. That is not an accurate account of what took place and how this individual received advice and consent. She was never properly introduced by Mayor Louis, as every single executive that's currently employed in the city. Instead, the individual was put forward to this council and received a unanimous vote as part of the consent agenda. Now, advice and consent is a serious process. It's a power that's given to this legislative body to appoint executives of our city to govern our city, on the executive side and the judiciary side. This is a position, an appointed position, that gets advice and consent by this legislative body, which is the chief prosecutor, the chief municipal prosecutor of the city of Trenton. This individual did not go through the proper process. She was not introduced properly. We never received a resume. The mayor never introduced her. So we're just asking for this constitutional process to be deployed properly. So this is why this resolution is introduced. So I would state on the record that there's a different process that has to be deployed for the chief municipal prosecutor of the city of Trenton. And no, she is not the typical employee. Employees do not come to council for advice and consent. So, however, I will defer to Mr. Harris, our registered municipal clerk here, as to what the process is for this council to follow to assure that this resolution gets properly vetted, gets properly deliberated upon. So I put this forward last week. I did not get any resistance from PCA, from Mr. Harris, from Mr. Morelli, that this resolution should be part of the regular employment process. For all intents and purposes, this is the first time I am hearing that this is where we are. So I would like to move forward with this resolution as I intended, to have it vote on by this council. And hopefully, in this council, we get consensus that we can finally get a proper advice and consent review for this individual and all the other candidates that had interest in this role. And that's the intent of this resolution. So I will move forward.
President Wright, I have one question, please.
There's a motion on the floor. We're going to continue with the motion. Ms. Caldwell-Wilson? Mr. Michelle? So the motion is to include this proposed resolution on the docket for your consideration on Thursday.
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. McBride?
Yes.
And the motion is passed.
President Wright.
Go right ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, President Wright. I have a question. This is out of ignorance. I really want to know, just for the record, do the license consent resolutions, do they have to be individually roll call? Is that, I'm asking the clerk in the law direction, not my fellow council members?
In my opinion, they do not. You approve something by the adoption of your resolution. The process has been that is how you have done it, but because of the I would say the unique circumstances behind this particular appointment, that process was not followed.
So, but you're saying that, well, could you elaborate on the unique circumstances of this process? In your opinion?
This resolution was originally presented for your consideration. It was removed from the docket because it was felt that the body did not have enough information on this particular individual to make an informed judgment. Based on your rules, once the resolution is removed from the docket, it's supposed to have been immediately replaced on the next upcoming docket.
Was that the case in this situation?
That was the case in this situation. That because I did not hear back, I did not include it on that docket, but through dialogue with the law director, he expressed the urgency at which he needed to have this appointment done because the court was without a chief municipal prosecutor. At the meeting on September the 19th, I believe, the resolution was presented to the body. Each member got a copy. It was explained in the course of the meeting, and the resolution was included in the consent agenda with the rest of the resolutions being presented by the city clerk's office at a efficiency. It was not an intentional subversion of the process. It's just how it unfolded.
So I'm sorry, it wasn't included on the Tuesday, the agenda meeting, or are you talking about?
That is correct. It was not included on the Tuesday agenda meeting. It was presented to you on that Thursday meeting where you voted on it and passed it.
Okay, so, yeah, okay, well, that's what I thought happened. Mr. DeWitt, can you confirm or deny Mr. Harris's statements as a representative from the legal department?
That's a discussion that Mr. Harris had with Mr. Morelli directly, so I can't be over anything more than what Morelli has told us.
Can we have Mr. President McBride, would it be appropriate to ask, I'll ask my question. Thank you. Fair enough. You're right. Okay. Thank you.
This came at the same time he was talking about 19534. We need to go back to 19534 because I think now we're here, but I'm not very conflicted. If you want to leave it like that,
Where all the 1954.
okay, the ordinance, the resolution said 4 years power work to hold the Trenton roughly market on October 19, 2019 from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. That part is okay. And October 20, 2019 from 10 p.m. to 5 p.m. at Wire 675 South Clinton Avenue. Now there is something as well with these numbers. First, October 19th is a Sunday. On Sunday, our ABC law said that you cannot start selling liquor until 2 hours. Sundays. Well, here, 10 p.m. We have to wait 12 p.m. or 12 p.m. So that at least 4 p.m. to 5 p.m.
So that is a typographical error. It should be from 10 a.m. until. So what you're actually authorizing here, Councilman, is a social affairs permit, which are technically issued by the state of New Jersey, not really by the city, but you are essentially saying that you don't have a problem with them issuing this permit to this organization for this event.
No, I have no problem. I have no problem with this 10 p.m. to 5 p.m. So it is, we have to go by our ABC law that says Sundays we can't sell liquor until after 12 p.m. Or the state that permit will override our ABC laws. So that's something, that's what we have to discuss with that older, with 1960, we are going to be talking about the same thing.
So again, the state is not overriding your ABC laws. If you do not desire for them to sell alcohol on Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., then you can say, no, we do not approve of this, and reject this resolution and recommend that they change it to whatever time that you desire.
It's not what I desire, Mr. Alice. It's what our ABC laws states.
Mr. Harris, the law is clear, the liquor license law is clear that 12 o'clock noon, there's nowhere in the city that we sell alcohol beverages before 12 noon. So you're saying on a Sunday, so you're saying that if we want to, it's not whether we want to, we're talking about the laws that are already on the book and in place. So when people get permits shouldn't they be abiding by the law that's in place for the city?
The ordinances pertain to plenary retail construction licenses, distribution licenses that are issued in the city. These are special permits being issued that you are asking to either approve or not. So you can say yes or no based on whatever determination that you determine, but these applications are not based on the ordinances of the city. So they're asking for a special permit. For example, there was a proposal to have sidewalk cafes put into the city, which would require a special permit from the body which does not conform with the rules and regulations, a special permit.
Okay, so on this resolution, it says from 10 p.m. to 5 p.m. So that means that they can go from 10 o'clock at night all the way through 5 o'clock the next evening.
The second 10 p.m. was a typo error, and it should have read 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Obviously, you can't go from.
No, it's not obvious. We're going by what's on the paper.
Okay, so on October 20th from 10 p.m.
No, but he already acknowledged 10 a.m. He already said it, 10 a.m. He said change it to 10 a.m.
So the 10 a.m. should be changed to 12 to 5 p.m.
That's what I say, or 7 p.m. or 8 p.m.
For the 19th, it says 10 a.m. on a Sunday.
So the way that it should read is October 19th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and October 20th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then p.m. was a typographical error. It should be 10 a.m. and I will have it correct.
And Mr. Councilman Santiago was saying that the first part on the Sunday should be 12 noon to 5 p.m.
So,
But if that is not what the applicant requested.
So,
Can you check the application and see if it was a typo or, what it says in the application? Because I have concerns with
The
the
application right here.
It says 10 a.m.
so, President Brown.
I'm confused because that means that any of these merchants, they can request a special permit to start something.
That is incorrect, because this is not a current license holder, or this is not a current license holder in the city of Trenton. To obtain a special permit, you need to be a bona fide, not-for-profit agency, either a fraternal organization, an educational organization. You cannot hold a liquor license. That is why they're getting a special permit being granted by the city to sell alcohol at this particular event. Without the special permit, they would not have the ability to sell alcohol. So you're essentially granting them permission to sell alcohol at their event from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on October 19th and 20th. Now, if you determine that you don't want them to do that, you can say no.
Thank you. So I would implore my colleagues to vote for this because the Pump Rock Festival is one of the premier annual events in the city. They have a lot of folks from around the region, around the country who come to Trenton. And if other organizations are interested in having a special permit, then I think we should give them the same consideration. But they have had these hours previously, from what I understand, and I think that as a council, we should be in the business of encouraging these types of events to bring people to our fair city, because these kind of events contribute to Trenton's revitalization. revitalization. And they're asking for 2 hours before the normal time. Then I don't necessarily think that is too much to ask for. So, but people can vote however they want, but I just hopefully we can encourage this kind of event. And if they're asking for this, that's probably part of their financial plan to make sure that they are, coming in black on the situation. So that's all I have to say.
Well, for clarity, we've received several of these requests a month. The reason that this one particularly before you because that is sitting on property, and they cannot sell alcohol on sitting on property without people observing by. So that is why this particular resolution is even before you.
I mean, something, yeah.
So this organization is Punk Rock Flea Market. This I think this is the 3rd year. And they have always requested this, and they've always operated under those hours for the sale of beer and wine. And it is a special license, and I would certainly support this resolution as it stands, because it is a great event, and it does attract a lot of people to come into the city of Trenton. We haven't had any fights. We haven't had any people getting drunk and falling all over the place. It's only twice a year. And like we said, it's a special permit.
And it's the same permit that you issued to Art all night when they want to have their affair and sell beer and wine all night long. It's no different.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. It comes back, then that means of the work of the agency law. There shouldn't be any opposition.
Thank you. Roll call 534. Roll call 534. Next for your consideration are resolutions presented by the Department of Administration under the directorship and approved. Resolution 19-535 is a resolution rescinding resolution 19-423 awarding for professional legal contract for professional legal services to McMahon, Scotland, and Bauman to provide professional services regarding general municipal and other legal matters. Resolution 19-536 is resolution authorizing the award of contract to the law office of McMahon, Scotland, and Bauman to provide professional legal services in regards to special counsel through a fair and open process in an amount not to exceed $25,000. Resolution 19-537 was a resolution authorizing the award of a contract with the law offices of Denver Law to provide professional legal services regarding tax appeal litigation through a fair and open process in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
And we roll call that, please.
536, you had the one rescinding on 536, which is a resolution authorizing and awarding a contract.
That's correct. I heard that, and not to exceed $25,000. Resolution number 19-538 was a resolution awarding a contract through a fair and open process to HJA Strategies, not to exceed $90,000. This resolution was requested by the DCA to be held. Resolution 19-539, Mr. Chair.
Commentary, Department of Administration. Just regarding Resolution 538, I did have a conversation with our monitor today. She would request that we wait until Thursday to make the official polling of this item. They may get their issues resolved prior to that date, and I will let council know before the meeting on Thursday. I will communicate to you, Mr. Clerk, whether the DCA has been able to resolve that issue.
Resolution 19-539 is a resolution authorizing the assignment of tax sale certificate pursuant to NJSA 35:5-133 to M&H Group, LLC. There was 9 properties associated with that tax sale certificate. The next 3 resolutions were presented by the Department of Health and Human Services under Resolution 19-51, resolution to withdraw at the request of the director. No, that actually, I'm sorry, this was previous. Resolution awarding a contract to a fair and open process to the rescue mission of Trenton for emergency shelter for homeless single men and women in an amount not to exceed $271,000. Resolution 19-540 is a resolution authorizing the purchase and delivery of one PB 2001 handheld XRF lead paint analyzer from Viking Protection in an amount not to exceed $27,360. And resolution 19-541 authorizing the purchase and delivery of one Nikon XL3 T7000S XRF Gold ROHS and alloy analyzer from Thermo Fisher Scientific Portable Analytical Instruments Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $27,250. These two resolutions are being presented by the Department of Housing and Economic Development under the directorship of Benjamin Delisle. Resolution number 19-542, authorizing change order number 1 and change order number 2 to the contract with Levi Construction Company to provide interior renovations to 1004 Division Street in an amount not to exceed $21,646.52.
I have questions on this resolution. I believe that we approved 6 months ago, $359,000, I believe it was from CDBG funds for the building. I believe to that building, I believe we now is only $361,000. I believe that money would be a brand new building. It's a regular building, it's not such a huge thing. That's what I'm saying, why the change order. I believe that $359,000 was too much.
Councilman, I can only speak to this change order. There was some, emissions or things that they found during the construction for these additional items. The price, the original price was done by a public bidding. It was the scopes put together, put out to bid, and that was the lowest responsible bid at the time. So I can't speak to the original price. Only that these change orders have come up during the course of construction.
Roll call, please.
Roll call resolution 19-542. And additionally, resolution 19-543, this is a resolution rejecting bid to receive the demolition of various structures.
I have a question on that also. We approved this before, and we have been waiting to use that. I guess the $11 million that was by the state demolished. I believe this was for 25 structures at the beginning that they took 2 out. Well, it's been a while already. And why is it that you're rejecting the bids now?
For a couple of reasons. Principally, the cost per structure exceeded the program guidelines that we have for each FMA, which is $25,000 per structure, and we go over $30,000 per structure. The other significant reason is we had 3 bids that were all separated by $100,000. So it just spoke to me that there's a lot of ambiguity in the bid, and that it was not a good bid.
So the 3 bids exceed the $25,000 per.
First, it exceeded the $25,000 per structure, and because of the disparity in the bid, one was about $450, $550, $650. When you have such a wide range, only 3 bidders, it tells me it wasn't a very good bid. So we will to rescind the bid, restructure or rewrite the specifications, and then back out and hopefully get better bids.
The next proposed resolution is being presented to the Department of Water and Sewer under the acting directorship of Stephen Pico. Resolution 19-410, resolution 530 previously tabled from your last topic, and we listed 19-410 is a Resolution 19-492 is a resolution authorizing payment for a contract with Structural Preservation Systems LLC for the repair of the main pump station manifold piping and an amount not to exceed $289,608 for the Trenton sewer utility. This was actually awarded on an emergency basis. Resolution 19-496 was a resolution accepting the bid and awarding a contract to Municipal Maintenance Company for preventative maintenance and inspections for the REP Technical Line slacking systems and an amount not to exceed $237,806. Resolution 19-500 is a resolution awarding a contract to New Jersey Business Systems for purchasing and installation of network cabling upgrade to the network infrastructure at the Trenton Waterworks. Awarded through New Jersey state contract and an amount not to exceed $143,191. Resolution 19-526 was a resolution authorizing payment for a contract with UConn Incorporated, which was awarded on an emergency basis for sewer repairs at North Cook Avenue and Hamilton Avenue and Chestnut Street, and an amount not to exceed $50,729.75 for the Trenton sewer utility. Resolution 19-527 was a resolution authorizing payment for a contract with UConn, awarded on an emergency basis for sewer repairs at 126 Fulton Street, in an amount not to exceed $30,702.34 for the Trenton sewer utility. Resolution 19-528 was a resolution authorizing payment for a contract with Water and Bugby Incorporated, awarded on an emergency basis for sewer repairs at North Clinton Avenue and Yard Avenue, in an amount not to exceed $47,608.86, again for the Trenton sewer utility. Resolution 19-529 was a resolution authorizing payment for a contract with Water and Bugby on an emergency basis for various sewer repairs in an amount not to exceed $92,407.77 for the Trenton sewer utility. And Resolution 19-530 was a resolution awarding a contract to a fair and level process to Adams, Raymond, and Hagan Associates for assessment of Trenton Waterworks Geographic Information System and Enterprise Geodatabase Design and implementation for ArcGIS Online in an amount not to exceed $48,750. Resolution 19-544 is a resolution rejecting bids received for altitude valve maintenance contract for various locations. Resolution 19-545 is a resolution exercising the option to extend the contract for 1 year awarded to SourceLink for printing and mailing services for regular, final, and corrected billing at the Trenton Waterworks Utility in an amount not to exceed $161,944.04. And Resolution 19-546 was a resolution accepting a bid and awarding the contract to the asphalt company for roadway reconstruction for 1618 North Open Avenue in Newton Township in an amount not to exceed $53,713.13.
We still have roll call on these emergency contracts. Is that correct, or?
That is correct.
Okay, unless my colleagues have any, wants to roll call any of them, because the reason I asked for roll call was because we were pending this fiscal report, financial report. So all of the emergency contracts could be added to the agenda. Unless one of my colleagues wants to roll call any of them.
I just have a question. I don't want roll call. I think it's good. You can put them in consent agenda as well.
So that they'll be added to the consent agenda.
So the
about the ones that, was it 19526, 19527, 19528, 19529? I think those are emergency contracts, right? Could I ask Director Pico to come to the microphone?
Okay, which ones are we looking at?
On page 5 and 6.
Mhm.
I just want to, since you're new, one of the focus of your department that you're headed up is the emergency contracts, and they have been very costly expenditures over the past, for decades, I suppose. So we just want to make sure that we make you aware that we're not picking on you, but we would want you to kind of align with us and be included that emergency contract is
It
something.
goes with the job, that's fine. I had the same reaction when my first day I walked in, my inbox was about that full. And about half of that volume was one kind of emergency contract or another. And I had one of those what the hell moments and just asked for an explanation of what the process is. And it turns out it's very episodic. They come in bunches, they come, this time of year, they'll come again in the spring when you get the freeze thaw stuff, and it's the nature of all of our infrastructure being underground and just moving and trudging over it, and it happens. I don't like the idea of having to come to you every single time for an emergency, a $50,000 contract here, a $35,000 contract over there, when it's all the same function. And in terms of when it happens and how it happens and what it is, it's pretty much the same thing. So I spoke to Adam about it. We're preparing, again going forward, that we're trying to put an overall emergency budget together to discuss with you. And the budget number is going to be my take on the rolling average of the last 3 years. What did we spend on emergency stuff over the last 3 years? Let's take that as a baseline and use it going forward. And if we budget that amount and we're encountering it and we stay within that budget, then we'll have an emergency budget line that you guys have already looked at and approved, and we can just move forward with it. You won't be getting hit with these emergencies. If it looks like we have a real emergency, then we'll be in front of you to explain what it is and get your approval to go forward.
Well, it's good that I think the process, what you just described, sounds like something that's workable. But I just want to, I don't know what the rolling average been, but I know when I first came on council in July 1st last year, 2018, we did an analysis, we did a spreadsheet when we took all the emergency contracts and they totaled $6.5 million for 2018.
Doesn't surprise me.
Right. So, but 6.5 million, that's a lot for our municipality that's fiscally stressed, right? So, but I'd like to look at it, right?
And just let me respond, that's exactly the kind of stuff that you roll into a rate base as opposed to treating it, that's a predictable expense. If we're expending $7 or $8 million a year on emergency contracts, then that's an expense that you can predict and you can budget for, and it's a legitimate rate base item.
Agreed.
I have a comment. I was at a training this past week in the Crucial there, and I asked a question of this emergency contracts. I don't think Mr. Cruz. They told us there at that training, BCA, that emergency contracts have to be in front of City Council the next meeting.
That's correct.
But some of these are from January, February, that's flat.
I have no excuse. I know.
That was a concern, and it was verified. So I would like that from now on they come ask.
I'll do my best. That's all I'll do my best.
Because if it's 6 months, 7 months, but we were supposed to have a year.
You're right. I mean, that's a standard and that's an easy.
But they accumulate, and then all of a sudden we get 10, at the same time, or?
Yes.
I am giving you a plan of having, like a separate one for that. That is.
That's part of what I was like, okay, I have a plan to address that so we can build it into a predictable rate model for everyone. That's what we're trying to do.
Can you give them to us on a timely, more timely?
Yes. Okay. I can answer anything else here. I had planned to give you a quick, this is what happened last weekend thing that I think you folks deserve to know about. Thursday night about 10:45 for you. Oh, ours? Oh, okay. I'll do it again. Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll.
No, no.
Finally, ordinance is being presented for first reading and introduction, ordinance 19-43, which is an ordinance transforming recreation and natural resources and culture into a separate department and transferring inspection to the Department of Housing and Economic Development. Ordinance 19-63, which is an ordinance establishing rights.
President Ryan. So a few weeks ago, you might have heard that I did a little investigation on Hawks towing regarding their not following the law as it relates to accepting debit or credit cards. The clerk sent out a cease and desist letter stating that their habit of not accepting debit and credit cards was contrary to the predatory towing law that was passed and signed into law by the governor. And so I started doing some more investigation on how we could increase consumer protection as it relates to towing in the city. I looked at best practices around the country and noticed that the city of Chicago had a very, very robust policy protecting folks from being abused by tow truck companies. I'm not saying that every tow truck company is a bad actor, but I'm saying that enough people in the city have negative experiences regarding tow companies that I believe that we should have some additional protection for the people in the city of Trenton when they tow. I discussed this with the law department. They have signed off on the legality of this ordinance that would do a number of different things. One thing that it would do is require photographs as well as onboard cameras on all of the trucks in the city of Trenton, so that folks would be able to actually see what is actually occurring, because there's a lot of he said, she said, as it relates to what actually has occurred at these things in terms of people picking them up, picking their cars up in places that they should not be picking them up. And this actual rule comes directly from Chicago. Chicago has the exact same rule requiring photographs as well as an onboard camera. And there's a number of other rights that are included here. The most important would be, I believe, is the fourth right with the towing bill of rights. And this is something that I think would really protect people who say if you're coming out, your car is about to be being hooked up. If, according to this ordinance was passed, if you come out before the car is lifted or is removed from the scene, the tow truck operator would have to drop it. And so that, I think, is an important consumer protection. If somebody comes out before it's off the scene, then they have the ability to remove the car from the scene. And that is another item that is directly from Chicago. So there's a track record of this actually being instituted. And I hope that my colleagues support this. It's been assessed by the law department, and I think that this would really provide an opportunity to protect the public from folks who, in some sectors, have been not following the law, and gives additional protections for the people in the city of Trenton. So, hope my colleagues consider it, and thank you. Yes.
I'm going to say yes or no on what Mr. Blakely is saying. What I would like to see in this ordinance is something in regards to what has been going on in Trenton for the past 35 years. We used to have lots all over here, Hanover, Stockton. There were empty lots that our residents used to park on. There was no, or because there's no parking in this area. This city was planned, was designed for horses and buggies, not for cars. And now, what's going on now is that we are, somebody did in the past, gave permission to these LLCs to use those vacant lots for their private parking space. Now they have a big sign there saying, if you park there, Hawks, because it's all Hawks, it's going to throw your car away. It's going to cost you $150,000, whatever. So that is something that we have to look at. If we give away our vacant space to corporations from outside the city, because all of them are from outside the city, well, you have to drive around and you see everywhere where our residents used to park, that lot now belongs to an LLC or a non-profit or whatever. Only their employees can park there. It's very unjust for the rest of the residents. So that I would like to see something like that added to this ordinance.
President Bryant, my colleague can definitely introduce an ordinance to that matter. I don't know what that has to do with this ordinance in terms of his suggestion, but if he feels that that is fine, I'd be happy to look at it and consider it in the same way that I did the work to introduce this ordinance. And also, I wanted to actually mention one additional part of the ordinance that is really important, is that relocators must notify the Trenton Police Department within 30 minutes after relocating any authorized vehicle. So that's really important, because what's happened is, and this scenario has been explained to me 1,000 times. If included in our contract with, I believe, Hawks, there is a certain portion of the money that they're supposed to give to the city as it relates to taking a car off of a lot. So they're supposed to be assessed, and they have to pay the city of Trenton. Well, from what I understand, what I'm hearing is folks have complained to me and have said, well, what happens is, say if you interact with them and they say, hey, we'll drop it for $100. What's occurred is they don't really call it in, and that money is assessed 100% to whatever the towing company is. And so the city, unfortunately, is not making the money necessary because, number one, they're dropping the cars, getting 100% of the money, and if that's not, or they'll tow the car and get the money anyway, whereas this ordinance would allow folks to actually remove their cars to avoid that, because they would have to drop it. And then they would have to, any car they would pick up, notify the Trenton Police Department so that we're aware and we have an opportunity to count exactly how many cars that they're towing in an efficient and effective way. As well as, the reason why I moved it last time, I added penalties so that when they fail to adhere to this ordinance, The first offense to be $500, the second offense to be $1,000, and the third and subsequent minimum fine would be $2,000. In addition to any fines imposed upon this chapter, the court may revoke or suspend any license or permit to operate a towing business in the city of Trenton. And so this would really encourage them to be good actors, to do the right thing. For years, they had been, particularly Hawks, had been breaking the law as it relates to only accepting cash. It was completely against the law, and my work in this effort led to them changing their policy, where they actually, in fact, I want to actually read it because I have my colleague, Councilman Michelle, who said it was not correct. So I want to read the record on Hawks towing.
Can you do that in your personal comments?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Not a problem.
So finally, ordinance number 19-65, which is the fiscal year 2020, an ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and establish a banking cap. Those are all the items presented for your approval on Thursday. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment at this time on any item that is presented on the docket for Thursday's consideration?
Come to the mic, sir. Come to the microphone and Mr. Brown. Yes, sir. And just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rafael Valentin. My address is 100 Division Street. I'm here on behalf of the Latino Merchants Association. I just have one comment and two questions, specifically with regards to Resolution 19-534. I ask that the council consider this as it's proposed, and the reason being that the influx of people into the city for those 2 days will exceed 10,000 visitors, and that's a plus for the city. And it's a very good marketing campaign that everyone benefits. So I ask you to please give that some serious consideration. In regards to 19-60, I have a question, if I may direct it to Mr. Harris. I just need to know for clarification purposes, I understand that Thursday is the public comment section, correct?
Right.
Excuse me, let the gentleman finish, and when you finish, later on, Mr. Harris will answer your questions. So go right ahead, because this is for the audience. For the questions, Mr. Harris.
Thank you. So, Mr. Harris, since Thursday is the open public comment section, if there are recommendations, I just need to know the mechanics of how that will work.
So what public comments serve as an opportunity for the public to come in and offer their thoughts, opinions, comments, and support or objection to an ordinance.
Okay.
If the council hears what they say and feels that amendments should be made, they will pass a resolution to amend the ordinance. If it is a significant amendment, then the ordinance will be republished. There will be a second public comment, and then it could be finally adopted. When I say significant, if it's something minor like, okay, from 10 p.m. to 9 p.m., that's not necessarily significant. But if it is substantially would change the 10 tenor, I guess you say, of the ordinance, then it would require a new publication and another public hearing before final adoption.
And so, the second part, that would be, if it's something that's significant, that would then be a first reading and a second reading, it's like all over again?
The first reading already occurred.
Right.
So if they make a motion to amend the ordinance, then it would need to be republished. And I would rely strictly on the law and record to make that determination whether they consider it to be significant or not.
Okay, that's very nice. And just one final item, if I may, and thank you for your time. In regards to dash 1963, this proposed ordinance of the Towing Bill of Rights. I think in the best interest of the city and to do this responsibly, it may be a good idea to consider just a working committee, just to get more information so that everyone can have a basis for, a substantial discussion, so that everyone has similar data and what's being done, not nationally, but what is happening in similar municipalities with the same class in terms of the population, the government classification here, and what are they doing? Because what I am aware of looking at this particular process is that the approval of a vendor is by the police department. It's done in December. The requirements say that the towing lot must be within the city of Trenton boundaries. They can have a trailer, it has to be fenced in. But there has to be data that maybe comes back to the council quarterly, so that someone's on top of this and not reacting to a crisis, but something that would be beneficial to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Public comment. Is there anyone else that would like to address the governing body at this time? Seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment? Second. Moved by Councilwoman Paul Wilson, seconded by Councilwoman Vaughn. Mr. Lindsay. Ms. Colville Wilson. Mr. Michelle. Yes. Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Ms. Vaughn.
Yes.
So, I am really concerned about this idea related to stopping public comment on Tuesdays.
We're at a vote, sir.
Well, I have the ability. Well, this is about,
We need to
I have the floor, and I'm going to use the floor.
We need to place it.
This is the comment that I have is about, I said people want to speak on issues that are not on the docket, and their ability to not speak on matters on the docket is blatantly against the law, and that's what I'm outlining. People want to speak, I have it here, the Senator Biden Mayor Open Public Meetings Act, and I have the text that completely outlines the fact that stopping the public from speaking on matters of whatever they want to talk about is a direct violation, and you can be sued. So the rules as it relates to this are completely illegal, and I can read it for the record, which I will do. Meetings open to the public. This is of the Public Meetings Act. This is 7A. Except as provided by subsection B of this section, all meetings of public bodies shall be open to the public at all times. Nothing in this act shall be construed to limit the discretion of the public body to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public in any meeting, except that a municipal governing body and Board of Education shall be required to set aside a portion of every meeting of the municipal governing body or Board of Education. The length of the portion will be determined by the municipal governing body or Board of Education for public comment on any governmental or school district issue. Let me read this again. For public comment on any governmental or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the municipality or school district. Furthermore, let's talk about the penalty and enforcement. Any person who knowingly violates any of the foregoing sections of this act shall be fined $100 for the first offense, and no less than $100, nor more than $500 for any subsequent offense, recoverable by the state by a summary proceeding under the penalty enforcement law. The Superior Court shall have jurisdiction to enforce said penalty upon complaint of the Attorney General or the County Prosecutor. Whenever a member of a public body believes that a meeting of such body is being held in violation of the provisions of this act, he shall immediately state this at the public meeting with specific reasons for his belief, which shall be recorded in the minutes of that meeting. Whenever such a member's objections to the holding of such meeting are overruled by the majority of the president, such a member may continue to participate meeting without penalty, provided he has complied with the duties imposed upon him by the section. So I want to be very clear that it's completely illegal. What we have been doing over the last year in terms of stopping public comment on Tuesday is illegal. And if it does not stop, I will be suing to stop this, because people have a right, according to the Senator Minor Public Meetings Act, to talk about whatever they want to talk about at every meeting. And the fact that my colleagues who used to support this, who were against this usurpation until they, I'm not even going to speak to their motivations, but it's completely illegal to stop the public from talking about whatever. And I'm just sick of this council continuously engaging in illegal actions, and if it does not stop, I'm going to sue. And I'm going to win because the law is crystal clear. So I'm voting no to cancel public comments because we have people in the audience who would like to speak, and they are being stopped. And I like it reflected in the meeting that it is being stopped based on my colleagues not allowing the public to talk about it. And so you guys can do this the right way and rescind the rules of procedure that stop public comment, or you can do it the long way, and I'm going to win because the language is very clear. So I hope you consider what I say and do the right thing, because the Public Meetings Act that governs this meeting is crystal clear. Crystal clear. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, I just say one thing.
And two of my colleagues on here once supported the public's unabridged right to speak. Councilwoman Vaughn and Councilman Rodriguez once supported having the public talk about whatever they wanted to at any meeting. And the public should wonder why they have changed their opinion if they have. Because I'm hoping that they will do the right thing and support overturning this blatantly illegal ordinance that stops the public from participating in their government and talking about whatever they want to talk about. Thank you.
I just want to follow up with the comments that Councilman Blakely has expressed about the procedure of allowing only public comments for only the items on the document Tuesdays. Now, he is absolutely correct. I was totally against it. And I'm not supportive of it until this day. I went to our law department, Mr. Morello, that Mr. Blakely has clearly major confidence in. Mr. Morelli wrote an opinion, I have an email, supporting the rule. I tried to get it overturned, tried to argue the unconstitutionality of it, and Mr. Morelli said, contrary to what Mr. Blakely is saying tonight, that is totally lawful and totally constitutional. And I will share that opinion that Mr. Morelli voted on. Actually, he cited case law that supported this procedure that we are deploying here in our meetings in our conference session. So I will share that with this with my council body, and specifically Councilman Blakely, that our law department says that this process of allowing public comments only on docket items on Tuesday is lawful and constitutional. So I have no idea. So we'll see what happens. But I think Mr. Blakely should remember that clearly, but he doesn't. So, but I will share that on Thursday with everyone. That Mr. Morelli, our law department, our director, who represents the entire city and the mayor and his council, said that in his opinion that it's lawful. Thank you.
The motion has passed. So next on the agenda for civic comments.
Councilwoman Long.
Oh, I'm good this evening, thank you.
Councilman Michelle.
Issues tonight that were directed that people want to speak here, gentlemen in the back here, was in my office today. And I suggest that he talks to our director over here. It was pretty much cleared up. I called Mr. Johnson, Edmund Johnson, concerning his problem. However, Wally, maybe you can help him out, the gentleman over here, when the meeting ends, if you could assist him. Mr. Evan Johnson, I was involved with his deal where we opened up a street 2 times for clarification.
We already got that.
You already got that? Okay.
I already sent it over to the board.
I was unaware of that. I was unaware of that. I apologize.
No worries.
For taking the time. Yes. The other issue is the wood towing that Mr. Blakely left. But the towing runs from the city police department. He always did take credit cards and debit cards, but not on seizure vehicles that were towed from the police department. Because when they got a big bill, the vehicle was left at his location, and it was there for several months. When they paid by credit card, as soon as they left the building, they canceled the fees, and they had to turn around and take it to court. But if your car was towed in, he absolutely took credit cards and debit cards. Now, what he's talking about now is Chicago, and that's private property. You're talking about put the camera on every tow truck. His fees, I believe, are $80 a tow. The cameras are several $1,000s, which means somebody's got to pay. So your tow is going to go up. The rate's got to go up and pay for the cameras. He didn't mention all that when he goes in there. So that's a problem there. But if you look at the ordinance and everything like that, there's questions that should have been addressed now, but Mr. Blakely ran out. So we continue on Thursday's meeting. And I thank everybody for showing up. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councilwoman.
It's unfortunate that Councilman Blakely has gone, but regarding his towing ordinance, I had discussions with the police director's office, with the police department, since they handle the contracts for towing, and they could actually sit down when the contract comes up for renewal and renegotiate what they're going to do. But what Mr. Blakely is doing with this resolution is an unfunded mandate. And it's just like Councilman Michelle said, if you put a mandate on these companies to keep records, additional records and photographs, to make additional calls, to add additional staff, and to put cameras and all this equipment into their vehicles, that's going to cost them money, and they're going to pass that cost down to the consumer who gets their tow card, their car towed. And Mr. Raphael was correct that there's absolutely nothing wrong with sitting down and having a discussion. But unfortunately, the councilman didn't discuss this with anyone, all the way to the police department, or myself, or anyone else. I've had my experiences with Hawks, but I know that they do a lot of community service, and they do work with the community. I don't think they intentionally are going out there, they're just doing their job. So if we can have conversations with them, and we can change some rules, but when you start putting price tag on it. I think that's wrong, because the person who lives in the city of Trenton who gets a car towed, they're going to pay for that. So, thank you, and thank you everybody.
Well, thank you for coming. I have to refer back to this hard work. So I'm into that every year. I know the organizers. I have nothing against that. I just wanted to clarify the 10 p.m. to whatever, because I wanted clarification also in these special licenses and stuff. I will definitely vote yes on that, because yes, they do a good job. Thousands of people come to Trenton. We spend money in Trenton when that happens. Hopefully we can develop the rest of these areas so they can stay, and hopefully the city announces that we also have businesses in Chambersburg, some nice establishments there. A lot of them. Was expecting the administration to finish their signs with the new names. We used to have signs all over. In Broad Street, in every corner, they have signs announcing the Chambersburg Restaurant District. Exactly, with the names on that. It was promised that was happening. I haven't seen it again, but I wish that happens. When I will be at that festival, I don't drink before 4 anyway, or before 3 or before 5. I hardly drink, but I have no opposition to that. Thank you.
I would like to take this time to just discuss the water crisis that we went through on Friday. And I would like for Mr. Pico to come up at this time and just shed some light, because as a council member and part of the board of directors for the board, the one question that I would like to ask is if the body can get the computer printouts of what occurred. I'm told by several engineers that we have our systems sophisticated, and our computer generates yes, to exactly tell us what occurred. And so I'm asking for that report today. I would like that put on the record, Mr. Harris, that I'm asking for that report, and I would appreciate it if I could get it by Thursday's meeting. And the second thing that I would like to ask Mr. Pico before he explains the actual situation to us that occurred on Friday, I would like the administration to understand and recognize that we are servicing our customers at large and the residents here in the city, and there should be some type of plan in place whereas if this ever occurs again, we are prepared to issue bottled water to the seniors and to the disabled, and ask and communicate or bring the stakeholders to the table, which are the schools and the hospitals, so that they will also have a plan in place for an emergency such as this. When we're in a full day of school and a water advisory goes out, our children are left defenseless. So we need to actually sit down with our stakeholders, which are the schools, the hospitals, any major corporations that are here in the city, and especially when it comes to the seniors, and just try to devise a plan so that we will not be wondering whether or not those children drank that contaminated water.
Okay. All good points, and I agree with you. We had a debriefing, first of several debriefing meetings today on that exact point. School superintendents have been added to our instant call list. I mean, they're right on the priority calls. And the hospitals were already on the call. We've worked with them. They were called early. We got great cooperation from them. They know they had a drill that they handle internally when something like this happens, and all of that worked pretty well. Let me take you through this and then tell you what we're doing to address a scatter alarm, just an alarm system. It's tied to different parts of the plant. Went off. Took about a half hour to determine that the alarm was being triggered by a low chlorine reading in our water that was leaving the plant. We add chlorine to keep the bacteria in. It's the primary treatment at that stage. Notices went out internally to Taya and her folks, and they began an investigation to see why the chlorine level was low. They determined first that the pumps were working. I took about a half hour of pressure tests and things of that nature. Once you know the pumps are working, then you know there's a leak somewhere in the system. And those of you who have seen the water plant understand if you haven't, a good portion of the water plant is underwater. It's a water treatment plant. A lot of the things that happen are out of view, and there's miles, I would guess, of piping in the water system. So what we had to do was to draw down the water, and as pipes became visible, begin visual inspections and check whether or not we had some problem. That process started immediately at about 4 o'clock in the morning. There's a state rule that when you have a condition like this, you have to notify the DEP hotline. We notified them at around 4:15. They called back about 15 minutes later, described the problem, described what was going on. They approved what we were doing so far in terms of continuing the investigation. But it was mutually decided that in an abundance of caution to issue a water advisory, not an order, an advisory. We have a situation, we're not quite sure how serious it is yet, but in an excess of caution, I'm letting you know that this situation exists, and if you're concerned, boil your water, do this, do that. This is what the advisory essentially said. That advisory was, the decision was made to issue that 5-ish, I guess. The robocall started going out about 6:30. At 6:30, we discovered the cause of the problem, and by 7 o'clock, the plant was back up and functioning correctly. So there was about a 7-hour window. Fortunately, at the middle of the night, when we were putting out water that was not untreated, but was treated with levels of chlorine below what the state and the regulations thought was appropriate. We then, once we notified DEP that the plant was back online, the various notifications were going out. I'll come back to that in a second. Then we took samples. The law requires us to go to the outermost points of the system to take 2 types of samples and bacteria levels. It's a system that I think is flawed, but I'll describe why in a second. You can get a fluorine or chloride result literally instantaneously. It's like dipping the pH thing into a pool or something, and no right way what the results are. The bacteria one, however, requires that the central lab is held for 24 hours before it's ready. And so, as soon as you declare an emergency, you are declaring a 24-hour emergency, even if you determine, as I think we did, very much earlier in the process, that we didn't have a problem. And the reason I say that is all our chlorine levels came back fine. And if the chlorine is in the system to kill the bacteria, and the chlorine levels are fine, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the bacteria level should be fine too. I understand why they insist on an excess of caution, but that's the rule. We followed it as we took the samples as soon as the 24-hour thing was over. They were red, they were clean, we lifted the advisory about 1 o'clock in the afternoon the following day. On the technical side, I want to tell you what worked and what didn't work. On the technical side, we could not have asked for a better response from the technical people at the plant. Taya and her people did exactly what they had to do. They did it quickly, they did it professionally, and once it was discovered, and if it had been discovered at 2 o'clock, it would have been fixed at 2:30. But given where the leak was and how long it took for us to get there, it was discovered at 6:30 and fixed at 7 o'clock. And which I think was a pretty good turnaround time for something like that. The notice thing brought up a lot of issues for me. The biggest one is that through a miscommunication, Hopewell Township was left off the notice, so there was a period where Hopewell Township, the officials were telling their people they were not in the advisory when they were in fact in. That all got worked out, but you guys understand beyond how many people Hopewell had already met with and issued an apology to on our behalf. It was totally our problem. Taking steps to see that it doesn't happen again. Then we go into who got noticed, when, and the rest of it. And we had a cabinet meeting this morning where we talked about this. The fire director and I are meeting tomorrow on this. We need to coordinate our emergency response a lot better than we have. And the fire director didn't get called. Emergency response didn't get called. Because it wasn't viewed as that kind of an emergency, where there was no loss of fire, there was no loss of water pressure, there was no real water quality issue beyond the water advisory. But it pointed out, we have several systems and they're not all talking perfectly. So we've been tasked to make them talk perfectly and to make them talk perfectly pretty damn soon, which we're going to meet tomorrow to begin with. And it's really updating our 911 capability, which we can do for free by joining the county split 911 system. I was kind of surprised we weren't in it already. That way they have automatic access to all the townships, our customers, 911 information, and we can just put a blast out. We're going to change how the robocall system is set out. A big problem was manipulating our website at the time. We're in the middle of a reboot of the entire city website, so that's been identified as being worked on, and with our IT folks today on that. So we know that's there. The thing about the schools, I absolutely agree with. We should have a plan in place, especially if this happens during the school day, that alternatives are in place to take care of it. It's an easy thing to do. It happens in most emergencies. Had we triggered the emergency response protocols in the traditional sense, that probably would have been available. They will be triggered next time. I can assure you that we've already made that adjustment. So our plan is to meet over the next couple of weeks, fine-tune our notice lists. I'd be happy to sit down with whoever and take whoever through what we're doing and what the final thing looks like. You guys are on that call list as well. We didn't do a bad job. We didn't do as good a job as we're capable of doing in terms of the notice. On the technical side, it was everything we wanted to have happen if you had a problem. They were competent, they understood the problem, they addressed the problem, and they fixed the problem. That's what you want your technical people to do. The soft side needs some work, and we're going to work on it.
The report that is given to DEP, can we also get?
Sure, it's a public document, absolutely.
And before, under Fire Director Bashir, anytime that there was an emergency, we have an emergency call center over at the fire department where everybody would convene and then they would deploy the response, like ASAP, everybody would be there, including any council members that wanted to, but mostly the fire director, all the first responders, the people from the water department, they would all convene there at our central location. And so whatever occurred.
Didn't happen. I mean, it didn't happen because that kind of, it wasn't deemed to be that kind of emergency. And it will be deemed to be that kind of emergency going forward. Whenever we have a system-wide event like this, whatever it is, and this is, I want to emphasize, it's an advisory and not an ordinance. In the real world, that's a distinction that's lost, particularly with the TV and social media picks it up. It just goes off into a totally uncontrollable direction. But we did it in advisory because we really weren't sure that the water was impacted at the tap level. And I have to tell you, on a personal basis, I believe because of the constant chlorine readings, we never really had tap impact in the pipes. But I think by the time it got to somebody's tap, it was fine. But I can't prove it. I just have collateral evidence to support that statement. But it doesn't excuse the fact that we could have done that and didn't. And it was only because we weren't structured in a way to get it done, and we're going to be structured to get it done in the future. I mean, it was a good point, and we're working on it.
Yes, Councilwoman Vaughn.
So, thank you very much. Just a quick question as far as coordination across all the, I guess, relevant first responder groups or whatever have you. So, a big component of that is the health and human service space. So, could Shakira Ali kind of discuss, what her role is in the health department to make sure that all the hospitals and, those entities are connected?
So, good afternoon, good evening, Shakira Ali, Community Human Services. So we really just had a conversation about this morning in the cabinet meeting, and we discussed the changes that we need to make to our emergency response system. I am included in the group and going forward. So, yes. Well, we kind of kept it moving anyway. We were alerted to the water advisory. We were advised that it was not, what's the word, like critical, like not like we needed to start distributing water at that point. I think the advisory district than the boil water order was advised. It wasn't a mandate, after the mandate, we would have responded more urgently.
And that was a little blind spot on our framework. I mean, you put an advisory out, and all technical people know the difference between an advisory and.
So when we put out.
When we put an advisory out there, we're going to treat it good. I mean, we're not going to order people to do it, but our response will be as if we had ordered people to do it.
So what type of system would you propose we start using or deploy or build out?
There's
Like, for instance, the Department of Homeland Security, right? And I know we have an element on ACO to comply with their measures or, their issues. So they have the color coding system that everybody has become familiar with, like particularly with terrorist activity, right? Red, yellow, green, of course, red is the highest score. So are you going to kind of define this? So, I mean, what defines a serious, low,
Well, I think what we're going to do is set the bar a lot lower for full OEM involvement. I mean, that's the bottom line. And as I said, we're talking tomorrow on exactly that point. We have the pieces, right? I mean, those folks know what they're doing. We weren't talking. I mean, it was a communication. It's not that we need a whole bunch of money to do something different or anything else. This is soft stuff. Soft stuff is when the pieces are there, but you don't have an order. So this is interdepartmental communication. This is making sure we're all using the same robo system. We're making sure we're using the same 911 system. It's coordination. And this was a coordination problem first and foremost. And we know it. And once you know it, there's no excuse not to solve it. So we're in the process of solving it.
So can you, just in closing, my last question, so did you have a conversation along with the mayor, with Commissioner McCabe, and did she give us a grade as to how we did or how we didn't do? And we don't want to be blindsided, the council or the city.
No, I get it.
Yeah, they're going to come up with violations, say we didn't do all these things and penalize us in some way. Are you?
They had some communication problems on their side as well.
Okay.
And we were working smoothly, and everybody was on board at the staff level. Their emergency people, our emergency, they were talking, everybody was together, technical people were back and forth all the time. Commissioner had a bit of a disconnect on her side as well. That got corrected later, when you're running a department like that, it's hard to get on top of something like this overnight. So she had a reaction that was probably an overreaction because she hadn't been fully briefed on exactly what was happening. Once she got fully briefed and talked to the staff, everybody was on the same page. So, and that happens especially in a pressured, high-profile situation. You can't get too excited. You can't get too excited.
So are we going to be, this is going to be a penalty issue?
I don't think so. I think the response, there may be a technical problem because of the Hopewell thing, but in every way that mattered to public health, the response was quick and decisive and favorable.
So when you say that, Mr. Pico, just looking at the news and everything, and our the perception that the at-large community had, and we had, short of having the Army Corps engineers there, you got 3 contractors, plus you got all these people with these licenses in the water department now. So my concern is how we deal with our customers, because the customers are very important and they feel as though they need enough information from us soon enough. So how can we address that issue?
We're doing a couple of things. And again, I immediately issued a written apology to all. I had published it in the papers. I did that yesterday. If you make a mistake, the only thing you can do is own it and move on. And that's when we explained the situation and got a good response back from the mayor, and I'm going to a public hearing now. And I expect to get flagged, and I deserve to get flagged, and then we'll take it from there. In terms of our overall customer base, we're instituting a newsletter that we're going to fold into our bills. I hope to have the first one ready for the next billing. If I can't, we'll put out a special mailing to everybody, put it up on the website, basically a report on the event. I have my partner working on a draft already, and it's something that everybody can look at. This is what happened, this is what occurred, this is what we're learning, and we'll keep you posted as we move forward. But it'll be that message. The technical side work, we need some work on notification. We understand we need to do that, and we'll keep you posted as we move forward.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it. And then we can get that report and plus get that scanner, computer generated.
Right. Okay. We'll do.
Thank you so much.
Just a second. Mr. Pico, can we have about 40% of our residents are Latinos who speak English around that? Can you make sure that
Everything is, my executive assistant is fluent, and she's, one of her duties is to basically translate every major public thing into